Welcome back to the McCann Dogs podcast, episode 51. And this one is a special one for those of you who are multiple dog owners, or maybe you have one dog and you're thinking about getting another. Joining me this week is the Director of Online Training from the My Dog Can program, Instructor Shannon Viljasso. Thanks for joining us, Shannon.
Hey, thanks for having me. Hi, everybody.
Now, we are going to jump right into this. I know as a multiple dog owner, and Shannon, you as well as a multiple dog owner, that there might be some unforeseen challenges that our listeners might have. Again, whether they're considering getting another dog or they've got a couple of dogs and maybe they think adding one more to the mix won't be that much work, or maybe it'll be the most gratifying experience they could imagine. So we're going to jump right into this. This episode of the podcast is called When One Is Not Enough. I'm Ken Steep, and welcome back to McCann Dogs. I love opening these, Shannon, with what was the reason for writing this article? And this, if you're new to the podcast, we often chat about some of the amazing writing that Shannon does on the McCannDogs.com website on her blog posts. And this is such a popular topic, Shannon, for some of our households that we, in families that we work with at our training facility. Why did you feel like you needed to talk about multiple dog owners?
We get this question a lot. We get people calling a lot and saying, you know, I want to add a dog to my household. I've already got this old dog, and how do I do this? How do I introduce a dog? How do I make sure that they get along? Or, you know, even a cat or another pet of some sort. So I thought, a very common thing to want more than one dog, of course, because dogs are amazing. So why wouldn't you want to add more and make life even that much more amazing with your dogs? And certainly there is absolutely nothing wrong with having a multi-dog household. That it's an amazing, wonderful thing. It's great for your dogs to have relationships with each other. It's great for you to have individual relationships with each of your dogs and with them collectively as a group as well. But there's definitely some downfalls to some of the ways we might get another dog. We might introduce another dog. We might allow that other dog to take over the household, so to speak. So I thought that it was high time to sit down and write this article and set out some of the positives and the negatives and some of the ways that you can avoid the pitfalls as well with multi-dog households.
Now, long before I was a dog trainer, I had a family pet dog. She was, I guess maybe 5 or 6 at the time. And then I got Deegan, who, they were both labs. My older dog was just a laid back, happy-go-lucky, really wonderful family pet. And Deegan was a wild and crazy puppy. I mean, in sharp contrast to the senior or the older dog. It was really, I mean, they were polar opposites. So it was like the odd couple. And not knowing enough about how to build a relationship with that puppy at the time. This is again before I started training dogs, and I did everything wrong. I did everything you can imagine wrong. And
you probably did a couple of things right.
Well, I'm sure, potty training went really well because I was good about the structure of that. But in terms of introducing them to one another, I made a lot of bad choices. And what inevitably ended up happening was that the older dog developed an ulcer from the constant interaction of the puppy, Deegan, who again was just wanted to be a puppy and wanted to play and rough house and things. But I didn't really consider, what sort of impact that might have on the older dog. But after becoming a dog trainer and seeing the value of really focusing my time and effort on dogs individually, it really sort of highlighted for me some of the mistakes that I made. And that's why I sort of remember that in such a funny sense that, I probably made all the wrong choices. But knowing that, also understanding and seeing people who come in with their second dog, or their third or fourth dog or whatever, that come back to us for training for that dog, for that new dog. There's something that we refer to as second dog syndrome. And this is something that we see some people experience because their very specific experience with the dog before went one way. So they assume that it'll be very similar the second time. Talk to us a little bit about second dog syndrome.
Yeah. So it sounds like you definitely had a case of second dog syndrome there. I lived through second dog syndrome as well. And in hindsight, I can see it clear as day when I had just gotten my second dog. It was Jaden. He was a Nova Scotia duck tolling retriever, 8-week-old puppy. I picked him up from the breeders, and I remember thinking, I train dogs now. You're going to be a great dog. You're going to be such a well-trained dog, and being pumped about that. And that was a wonderful feeling. And I love thinking back to that feeling. But then the things that happened shortly after that are where I fell into that second dog syndrome. So expecting Jaden, who was brand new and knew nothing, to basically behave the same way that Quincy, my Rottweiler, who I'd been training for, she was 3 years older than Jaden. So I had spent 3 years training Quincy and struggling in some aspects and triumphing in other aspects, and really learning how dogs think and learn, and coming along in the dog training world. And you get to a point where you forget how much work you've put in. You forget how much individual time that dog has gotten from you. You forget all of the sweat and tears, the sweat equity that you've put in. You forget all of those things. And you sort of project where you are in that relationship onto the next relationship. So poor Jaden, I was expecting to behave as Quincy did. And, luckily I'm in a place where I had lots of support and lots of great feedback and lots of people pushing me and saying, hey, you know what? You're stuck in this wrong mindset. You need to treat Jaden like a brand new dog, because that's what he is. But we fall into this idea that we can just afford the same luxuries and the same freedoms to our second dog because our first dog is doing so great. So we want to be careful not to leap into that mentality. We want to make sure that each dog is treated as a unique individual, and each dog is afforded the same information and the same learning and the same respect that that other dog had as well, so that you don't end up in a situation where your expectations are all over the place and the dog doesn't have the foundation because you forget to put in the time and the effort. So that second dog syndrome can sometimes be a little bit of an achy lesson, but I do remember that being a good lesson for me. I think the universe was working hard to provide me with that lesson at the time, because I do remember working through those emotions and finally going, okay, you know what? This is not a bad dog. He just doesn't know yet, because of course I was expecting him to know so many things that he didn't at that point. And then I was getting frustrated with him because he wasn't behaving as I was expecting. So I think that was a really good life lesson for me, that second dog syndrome. You're probably going to go through it if you're just getting into your second dog, but it is definitely something you can work through.
And it's something we chatted a little bit about in our last episode. And if you didn't get a chance to listen to our last episode, we talked a lot about how each dog is unique. Every single dog is a little bit different. No two dogs are ever alike. And when you talked about having the same expectations, it may come in through a little bit of a different approach to your training. Maybe you spend a little bit more time on one exercise than another. That we do sort of need to be able to adjust how we approach our training with our dogs, so that we maintain those same high expectations, but just the path to get there may be a little bit different. And that's so important to remember when we're talking about getting another dog, adding another dog to the household. I don't know how many times I've heard students say, like, wow, I'm spending so much more time teaching walking on a loose leash to my current dog than I did the last dog that I brought here, but his stays are brilliant. And it's like I didn't even have to teach them. He just already knew how to stay. So you may need to focus a little bit more on one specific aspect of their training. Now, a great way to do that is to spend specific time with that dog in your house. And you talk a little bit about that in your article, talking about one-on-one time and how important that can be.
Yeah, absolutely. It is so crucial. A lot of the times we get this puppy and we've got this older dog already, and we can't wait for them to be the best of buddies. And that is wonderful in the Disney model of dogs, but the downfall of just throwing that puppy out to the older dog and allowing the two of them to spend all of their time together, there's so many downfalls. I shouldn't say the singular. There's so many downfalls. First off, the bonding that happens there, especially when you've got a young dog. If you've got an 8-week-old puppy who's just left their litter mates and their mother, and now they're in a situation where they're being thought of as an individual dog, and there's another dog in that situation, the bonding that is going to happen, the puppy relying on that older dog for information, and that older dog starting to, teach and impart things as well in that younger dog, the bond that's going to happen with the two of them is going to be so strong that in all likelihood, you will not be part of the equation at all, because the dog has learned to identify with other dogs. And now this is the only other dog in the scenario. It sort of cuts the humans out of the mix. And those first couple of weeks home, especially, I want that puppy to bond to me. I want him to look to me for information, look to me for food, look to me for all the resources in his life. I don't want him thinking solely in terms of other dogs and that other dog in the household. There's so many reasons why, yes, I want my dogs to have a good bond, but I don't want them to have such a spectacular bond that they are lost without each other. You never know what's going to happen with that older dog, especially if they are a little bit older. It can be completely devastating to a young dog if they've spent so much time bonding with this older dog and then something happens to the older dog. We hear of dogs that won't eat for weeks. We hear of dogs that, basically pine away in a corner. There's so many bad situations emotionally that are created by that bond being so tight. We don't want a situation where if the older dog has to go to the vet, for example, the younger dog is completely lost and beside themselves without that dog, even if it's not the inevitability of the end of life situation. We don't want to create that stressful situation for the young dog where they're lost without that older dog. So what we want to do is we want to foster the relationship with us. We want to have that puppy come out of the crate, spend quality time with us. Whenever I've got a puppy, I usually will allot very short periods of time to work with them because they have very short attention spans. And they also spend a good 22 out of 24 hours of a day sleeping when they're that young. So you've got this small window to take them out, play with them, teach them things, hang out with them, build your bond yourself, do whatever you want to do, but give that puppy 100% of your attention. And that sets you up for good training as well. It's going to be a scenario where you're watching them, you're ever vigilant watching them. So when they do start to chew that corner of the carpet, you're there to say, hey, no, you're not allowed to do that. Here's one of your chew toys instead. So being very diligent, watching that puppy, entertaining, teaching, whatever you want to do in that space of time. And then when you're done with that time period, putting them pleasantly back in the crate for a nap. And now's a great opportunity where you can take your older dog out and you can do something fun with that older dog as well. So they get good quality one-on-one time also. And that is going to help you maintain the bond with that older dog as well while you're developing a bond with the younger dog.
We often talk about how we ultimately want our dogs to listen off leash. We want our dogs just to listen around the house and to look to us for information and guidance in situations where they're just not totally sure. These are all really beneficial things. And I think something that our listeners should keep in mind is that when our puppies are really, really young, they've spent so much time with their litter mates that they understand one another. There's a language that they speak, whether it's whatever, it's not, verbal, but that they can communicate and it makes sense. And when we bring that new puppy home, we want them to start to learn how to communicate with us, how to understand what we say. And if we're giving them all these opportunities to be reinforced by the other animals in our household, then we become a little bit less important. And we really want our dogs to see us as important. It's such a cornerstone of dog training to have our dog really understand that we mean what we say and that we're worth listening to. I know that I went from after my older dog, I mentioned in the earlier story, I'd lost her, but I went from a 1-dog household to moving in with Kale to an 8-dog household. We eventually got another puppy, and there was a lot of effort to spend individual time with each one of those dogs, but there was a lot more effort that went into this. It was Rad, our old border collie. We spent a lot of time doing specific things with Rad, and then the group separately. So, for example, we would go out on a walk and we would go, let the other 7 dogs go for a run, and Rad would be with us on a leash. Or we would take Rad out, do some outside training, maybe some long line training or something, and then he could go and have a snooze in his crate, and then we'd take the other dogs out, because we know very very specifically, we wanted Rad to listen to us regardless of what other distractions were around. Our ultimate, goal and effort was to have him integrated into our pack of dogs. But we knew that how important it was that he listened to us, to sort of be granted that opportunity to have some freedom, make some choices, to be integrated into that pack. And I think people are so in such a hurry to have their dogs be close and be best friends and things, that they often sacrifice having their dog really listen. And I think that's one of the thresholds, or what the hallmark of a dog who's ready to be introduced to being around other dogs and with freedom and to make choices, is that they listen to you 100% of the time, or you have some way to follow up. You have a long line on them to train through that. I think that's a really important oversight that a lot of people have when they bring a new dog home.
Yeah, that is such a crucial point that you just made. We need to make sure that we have the verbal control of our dogs before we put them in a position where they can ignore us. So in that scenario that you just mentioned, it's so important for us to have skills on our puppies first. And people always ask, how do I introduce my puppy into the household? And certainly an introduction, like letting the dogs meet and knowing that they're both there, that is one step, but it's never going to be a situation, or it never should be a situation, where you simply open the front door and here's this new puppy and let it go visit the older dog in the household and cross your fingers and hope for the best. Because what happens if your older dog says, oh, I'm not sure about this, I don't like this puppy, and you can't stop that puppy? You have no control over that puppy once you've put it on the ground. And you're basically putting it in a situation where it might get hurt and your older dog might have to make a bad decision. It's not a good scenario to do. So I like to make sure that, yes, I bring my puppy in the house and I can let my older dog sniff and investigate a little bit while I'm holding the puppy. And then what I do is I will manage my time so that the puppy is out and my older dog is away. And I always have something special for the older dogs. So, for example, if I want to work with the puppy for that half an hour, I'll have a special bone or a special chew toy that my older dogs can go and lie down on their bed, and I'll give them that thing to chew, and they're just happy as anything because that's the special thing that they get when I'm working with the puppy. So it doesn't harbor this resentment. It doesn't end up in a situation where I'm trying to work with my puppy and the older dog is coming over and trying to get into the thick of things as well. I can rely on the fact that my older dog is either safely away in their crate if I don't have a reliable bed stay, or they're on their bed chewing that bone, and life is wonderful. And that way, that dog has something special to do while I'm working with the puppy, and then the puppy can go away. I'll take that bone away again because they only get that when I'm working with the puppy. And now I'll do something special with the older dog again, even if it's just 2 or 3 minutes worth of tricks or a little bit of healing or something that my dog really enjoys, just so that they get that individual one-on-one time as well. And what I will do with my younger puppies is make sure that they're not loose with the other dogs until I have some semblance of verbal control. So it doesn't necessarily have to be perfect, but what I don't want is I don't want my older dogs to be overwhelmed by the puppy. And puppies are wonderful. We love them. They're fantastic. They're lots of fun. We play, we have a blast, but they are also pests, and they have sharp needle teeth, and a lot of dogs do not like puppies. There's something in the dog world called a puppy pass, where until a puppy is about 12 weeks of age, most dogs will be lenient with the puppy. Most dogs will let them be the intolerable, little teething machines that they can be, and they'll let them get away with that. Not all dogs. So know that there's lots of dogs that will not grant a puppy pass, and you could end up with a puppy getting bitten by an older dog. So be aware of that. But once they hit a certain age, the puppy pass expires and the older dogs will start putting them in their place. You don't want that. I don't ever want my older dogs thinking that they need to discipline my younger dog. I want that puppy to understand that he needs to defer to me. And I want my older dog to understand that I've got his back. You don't have to tell that puppy off, because I don't want either of them to be in that position. You don't have to tell that puppy off, because I am going to keep that puppy from harassing you, which means I need to set up my scenario. I've got my long line on. I've got a puppy that's not loose with the other dogs until he has some response to name or response to leave it or something in that scenario, some way that I can save my other dogs, or I can save my puppy very quickly without needing to rely on physically getting there.
I think mentioning that you do need to put some special focus on your older dogs. That it's so easy to overlook that when you have a puppy in the house with all of the puppy challenges that you may have, potty training and whatever other family dog training that you want to do with your puppy. But spending time with your older dog does need to be on your list of things to do to avoid some of these challenges that you talked about. But also because you're changing the environment for that older dog. That older dog might need to work on the puppy as a distraction as well. Maybe it's really enticing because you've had a one dog household for so long. All of a sudden there's a new four-legged little fur ball in the house and I can't wait to play with them. Maybe that's an opportunity to work on some response to name with that older dog. I mean, I think having seen all of the dogs that we do at McCann Dogs, I can think of all these unique, very specific examples of things that you could work on or reasons that you'd want to use these kinds of distractions in your house. But it's really one great training opportunity after another. And if you love training dogs, then getting that puppy is going to satisfy that need.
Yeah, absolutely. And here's a great opportunity to teach a bed stay or teach a go and lie down cue while you're working with that puppy. And you can have some treats and throw them to the older dog so that you can reinforce those things. Now that you are a multi-dog household, you need to figure out how to make sure that those dogs can live together harmoniously and how you can manage more than one dog at a time as well. So things like that will come in very handy. That's an excellent point.
I think my mind goes to some of the things that some of the questions that we answer on our YouTube channel, and people might be thinking like something like, well, what about crating at night because they'll both be tired? Having separate crates, having separate spaces, having separate food and water dishes is really important. I know something that I'm always sort of clinically minded. I sort of envision all of the medical reasons why you need to do some things, but knowing what that puppy's intake and output is, how much that puppy's able to eat rather than, having a shared space, giving them both an opportunity to stretch their legs out, relax, lie down and not worry about being pestered, even in in a sleeping scenario, when they might be tired already, is also, of note or is worth taking note of.
Yeah, definitely. And what you just said made me think about the litter mate factor. And a lot of the times people want to bring home two dogs because they don't want them to be alone or whatever the scenario may be. And we really discourage people from ever bringing home litter mates. There's so many negatives that come along with having two dogs of the same age at the same time, including something called litter mate syndrome, which is something that might show up a little bit later in the lifespan of your dog, somewhere around 8 or 9 months. You will often get, if you have litter mates that you haven't managed properly, you will often get fighting within the household with those litter mates who've gotten along for all this time. And then all of a sudden the switch just goes off when they start to reach sexual maturity, when things start to change on a hormonal level, you might get some fighting with those dogs, even if they've been thick as thieves. So one of the huge drawbacks to having litter mates. But the other drawbacks to litter mates is that, first off, that bonding that we talked about at the beginning, where they're so bonded to each other that you can't really get in between that, can't function without each other. We'll often see people come to class with multiple dogs, and they'll have one person in the household handling one dog and the other person in the household handling another dog. And as they're in class together, even when they're in completely opposite ends of the room, all they can do is think about each other. And some of them are so put out. If you've got a pair of dogs where the relationship is very obviously one-sided, one dog is much stronger emotionally and mentally than the other dog, that dog that is a little bit weaker will often just be beside themselves at the idea of not being able to get to their litter mate. So that can be a really, really challenging thing to work through. That bonding is so tough. But keep in mind as well, if you bring home litter mates, everything is doubled. The cost of those dogs is doubled. The time investment in those dogs is doubled. And we would absolutely recommend 100% that you separate those dogs if you do bring home litter mates, which means you're doing everything twice. You're taking one dog out for a walk and then the other dog out for a walk. You can't simply lump them together, let them be crated together, let them eat together. All those things will feed into that really negative relationship that could end up developing, which, is that extreme bond between the two dogs, and then later on perhaps they might not get along as well. So bringing home litter mates, if you're going to do it, you really need to do your homework, do your research, and make sure that you are doing everything you can to create an individual dog out of that situation. So you've got two individual dogs rather than one sort of conjoined dog there. Really, really risky scenario.
Now, I hope if you have been considering bringing another dog into your household, or if you are a multiple dog owner and maybe just recently brought a new dog in, that we've helped really give you an interesting or an informative perspective on what we see as dog trainers when it comes to multi-dog households. I think all of our trainers seem to be multiple dog owners, so we've all experienced it. We can all relate to how amazing it is to have more than one dog, especially for those of us who, and I know Shannon, I saw a recent post with you doing some amazing rally obedience with Ned. But if you have a sporting dog, or you're doing different sporting activities with your dog, it's so wonderful to have a couple of dogs so that, one does their turn and then they can go have a rest and you can continue working, which is often a lot of fun.
Absolutely.
Now, every single week, we would like to answer a question from our audience, and I know we had a couple of questions that came into us this week. And have you got that one queued up, Shannon?
Yeah, you bet. So we had another question from Patty Valentine, and Patty asks, is it possible to train a dog out of being an alpha female? She's not aggressive, just likes to keep distance between other dogs and me. We're hesitant to use the word alpha at any point because it's sort of, it tends to be this clamshell that tries to excuse away certain behaviors. So basically what I would say in this scenario is that because you've got multiple dogs, you need to have obedience individually on each dog that's strong enough that you can stop any behaviors that you don't like. So for example, I'm not sure what breed of dog this is that you're talking about. It sounds like it could be a little bit of a herding instinct, or it could be a situation where I like to call it the fun police. Often with our dogs, my Tyler was a fun police sort of dog, where if everybody was loose and things were just sort of casual, or if I was working with one dog, he would love to and get in the thick of things and sort of stop it from escalating and stop the energy from sort of raising in the room. So I would have to control that with him. And if I was in this scenario where I knew that was going to be a possibility, where he would come and try to shove one of the other dogs out of the way, or create more space between me and that dog so that he could control that space, I would very quickly tell him, no, you go and lie down, or I would put him on a downstay or something of that nature, so that he knew that wasn't his option to do. It's not your responsibility to manage this group of dogs. I am the person who is going to tell everybody what's what and put everybody in their, significant little area, so to speak. I don't ever want my dogs taking charge of that. So in that scenario, I would be removing that dog from the situation, and I'd be tempted to use some sort of a control exercise, like a downstay or a sit stay, just to remind that dog, you're not policing this situation. You need to look to me for information, and that those emotional control exercises like stays are so good at imparting that information and reminding your dog that you're the leader here, without being harsh, without being, a tyrant. It's simply going to be a good downstay or a sit stay. And then you can reinforce that behavior as well. Start to bring the dog back into the scenario if you think that they've sort of gotten their brain back in check, and see how they react with that scenario again. If they do the same thing and try to keep the other dogs away from me, well, obviously we need to do longer sit stays, longer downstays, more control work. That dog needs to understand that it's not his responsibility to manage things. He needs to look to me for information instead.
And if any of our listeners are looking for more technique, more personalized training, Shannon is the director of our McCann online dog training program. And Shannon, can you just give us a brief overview of what you might help our listeners with if they were to become a member of the McCann program?
Yeah, all of the basics and foundation work that you need to have a well-behaved family pet. So it's an 8-week program that's delivered in videos. They're all high-definition videos and very clear instruction. And it's going to teach you to teach your dog to come when they're called. And this is such a critical skill. Reliable recall is so important. And we will make sure you get there. We'll support you through it, through our Facebook group, through email, through video you can send us. And you can always contact our office as well. We have brilliant dog trainers answering the phone all the time. Everybody on staff here is a professional dog trainer, so they'll be able to answer your questions and help support you through the program. Recall, walking on lead, and stays as well. The other really nice thing about the My Dog Ken program is that there's so much interaction and there's so much time for interaction and support that we actually get a lot of really key concepts in dog training taught in those 4 months. And then, of course, there's option to continue if you decided you did want to stay as part of the program. So we have people that learn all sorts of things about dog training when they really just signed up to learn how to teach their dog to listen as a family pet. But we teach the why behind things. So they learn how to apply dog training concepts and how to make things great for their own life.
And I think certainly the thing that I see as being really valuable to our students is that it's specific to their situation. You know, we do have the recorded information, but really there's so much value in having a conversation with Shannon, or, you know, sending me an email or speaking to one of our professional dog trainers about your specific situation. And there's so much information available online, but when you get the right thing for your dog, I mean, it's hard to put a price on that, you know, the right amount of whatever, you know, through your training, or just a little bit of guidance. Maybe it's something very simple. You just need some clarification. I mean, we have professional dog trainers that are available 6 days a week to make a telephone call to, and they can answer all those questions. It's I totally agree. It's funny how much gets trained in the My Dog Camp program that is not, you know, part of the recorded content, or it's just the conversations we have to help people through their dog training challenges in the group. I think it's fun, and it's really rewarding for me as an instructor, for sure.
Yeah, me too.